Devil May Cry 5 is one of the best games I've ever played. Sometimes I might try to up the mystery in these videos and make you guess if my opinions changed or something, but not this one. Devil May Cry 5 was my most anticipated game of 2019 and it absolutely delivered and then some. I reviewed it a year after launch, but since then it's gotten new content that I wanted to talk about, and I also thought it'd be good to close this DMC saga revisit with a more comprehensive, top-to-bottom DMC 5 review. So let's get into it. Fans had to wait over a decade for Devil May Cry 5. It probably got to the point where people started thinking such a game would never even exist. DMC 4 was released in 2008 and DMC 5 dropped in 2019. But thankfully, I didn't have to wait 11 years for this game, I only had to wait 1. It was rather good timing, I'd say. It was early 2018 when I got into action games via my first playthrough of Metal Gear Rising. I wanted more games like that and saw the DMC HD collection containing 1, 2, and 3 around June of 2018, right before E3 that year. And what game got announced at the Xbox conference? Devil May Cry 5. It got this absolutely fantastic trailer where it starts out mysterious as to what the game actually is. I mean, realistic graphics and monsters in a huge city could be anything, until you see the logo and the badass Devil Trigger theme starts playing. It's one of my favorite game reveal trailers of all time, highlighting Nero and how many more upgrades he's getting in this adventure, making you wonder throughout the whole thing, is Dante in this one? Only for him to make a cameo at the end of the trailer. Though I don't know what Capcom was thinking revealing this trailer at the Xbox conference, the audience's reaction was a little weak. People clap when the game's name came up, but I feel like the reaction would have been slightly more explosive at the PlayStation show, which is funny because that's where Capcom revealed their other big game that year, Resident Evil 2 Remake, and the reaction was appropriately hyped up. Anyway, I can't say I was jumping for joy when the game got announced, unfortunately, because I was so out of the loop on Devil May Cry that I didn't even know DMC 2 was a bad game yet. But a new game getting announced did give me the motivation to try DMC 1 pretty fast though, when other games sit in my backlog for years. The rest is history. This quickly became one of my favorite franchises, and I was now very excited for Devil May Cry 5. I didn't consume much of the pre-release materials for it though. I don't remember watching many of the trailers, I just knew it was coming out on March 8th of 2019, and that was all I needed to know. I was in 12th grade when DMC 5 came out. March 8th was a Friday, so you can bet your ass I skipped school and went straight to GameStop first thing in the morning to pick up my pre-order of DMC 5 on PlayStation 4. Normally at my school, there was just a day in November where most of the students were absent, which always coincidentally aligned with the release of the latest Call of Duty game, but me, DMC 5. I played the game all fucking day. I beat the campaign that night, but in the time since, I've played Devil May Cry 5 for over 400 hours. It was just one of the most fun action games ever created. No, forget that. One of the most satisfying games, period. I covered it exactly 1 year after it was released, and that video certainly was good enough and got the job done, but I want to dig deeper. In late 2020, the world was graced with Devil May Cry 5 Special Edition for the PS5. This was an early buy for my PlayStation 5. With it, you had new features that we can get into later. I haven't touched DMC 5 Special Edition before today though, because I was already content playing the game on PC. Plus, I wanted to save my playthrough of Special Edition for a big revisit to DMC 5, and now years later, that day has arrived. So a big bad demon called Urizen tore Nero's arm off and got the Yamato sword from it and used it to become super powerful, managing to defeat Dante, Trish, and Lady, as their whereabouts become unknown after this. A month later, Nero and the mysterious newcomer V are the only heroes left to stop Urizen. Nero needs to take advantage of his new robotic arm to help in the fight, and at the same time, V tries to track down the Devil Sword Sparta in the hopes of giving them an advantage. These are the only two characters you play as at the beginning of the game, so that's a great place to start. The game makes a fantastic first impression. The prologue mission has the usual tutorial elements in it, but it's also really fun to play because it ends with a nearly unwinnable battle against Urizen. When you lose, the game begins, but if you somehow, some way manage to win, or go back to this mission after having cleared the game and easily win, you just get credits. The game's over before it even begins. When the game started properly in Mission 1, the cutscene directors brought their A-game as Nero leaps out of the truck and blasts demons in slow motion to the tune of Devil Trigger. It's one of my favorite opening action scenes in any game. It gets you hyped up and in gear for a badass game. DMC 5 was one of many Capcom games running on the RE engine. which to my surprise doesn't stand for Resident Evil Engine, it stands for Reach for the Moon Engine. It just so happens that all the modern Resident Evil games run on it. But anyway, nearly everything about this game is gorgeous. The particle effects are numerous and look dazzling, the lighting and detail is great, and the contrast between dark environments and light sources is mesmerizing. Sometimes the game can get a little too dark for my liking, and the hair on female characters is hit or miss, but otherwise I think this game was cutting edge visually in 2019 and still holds up well today. Running at 60 frames per second on PlayStation 4, even if it made the console sound like it was going to explode. But it was well worth it for gameplay this good. Nero in DMC4 was a simpler character to play as than Dante. Starting as him let new players learn the ropes of DMC mechanics before being given a moveset as complex as Dante's. Nero in Devil May Cry 5 does the same thing. This game was how a lot of current DMC fans got into the series, and I imagine getting an easy character to play as first was pretty important. Since Nero lost his demonic arm, he doesn't have the Devil Bringer at the start of the game. This was pretty fundamental to his combat in 4, but 5 compensates in other ways. His moveset, besides the Devil Bringer, is pretty much the same. His attack style is very aggressive as you send enemies flying and flailing, and you need to close the gap to keep it up quickly. You can do that with returning moves like the Streak, or the Mid-Air Streak, or the new Dive Attack, or Jump Slash maneuver. You can still quickly dodge attacks with the Table Hopper move, and can increase the power of your moves with the Exceed function on the sword, Red Queen. Like in DMC4, you can instantly rev it up with the right timing if you press the button while attacking. But one of my favorite additions for Nero in DMC5 is the Air Taunt. Taunting was a great way of increasing your style meter and Devil Trigger gauge mid-combo, but now you can do it in mid-air as any character. As Nero, it's just super useful for getting distance from or towards enemies, but you can also do the Exceed thing in mid-air as Nero, and it has some of the most generous timing of any Exceed function in the game. Just as long as you don't get sick of Nero saying this.
Let's get airborne, riding high. Let's get airborne, riding high.
To replace the Devil Bringer, you have the new Devil Breakers. Nico, the daughter of DMC4 villain Agnes, is a mechanic and friend of Nero's and has come up with a bunch of robotic arms for him to use. You unlock more of them throughout the game, but you start with some basic ones like Overture, which you use to send enemies away with electricity or blow them up by attaching explosives, or Gerbera, which turns into a giant laser, or Punchline that allows you to do a giant uppercut. Using the charged up version of any of these attacks destroys the Devil Breakers, so you need to use them carefully or keep an eye out as you find more of them scattered throughout the levels. During your first playthrough of DMC5, the Devil Breakers really mix up the gameplay since you don't know which ones you're going to find, and then you have to use them to the best of your ability in the midst of combat. Getting hit while trying to use one also destroys it, so it's got a risk versus reward element attached to it. One of my favorites to use in the early game was the goddamn Mega Buster from Mega Man. Everyone here hopefully knows how much I love Mega Man, so seeing Nero fire the pellets from the classic Mega Man games and do the jump pose and the slide instead of dodge rolling was a real treat. The best Devil Breaker was the Buster Arm, though. This one just becomes the Devil Bringer, allowing you to slam enemies around. It's the core function of Nero combat, so I just stuck to this one as much as I could as soon as I unlocked it. However, I think all of them are fun to work with before you unlock the actual Devil Bringer at the end of the game. All these improvements and refinements just make Nero's gameplay even better than it was in DMC4. But mentioning the greatness of Nero's gameplay requires that I talk about the music. Nero's battle theme, Devil Trigger, is prominently featured in the reveal trailer and is one of the best songs ever made for a video game. It's high energy, it's hype in combat, and is a great listen that was well composed and performed. I love this song, so much so that I made it every character's battle theme for a while. What's great about the music in this game is the dynamic element to it. When combat starts, the music will kick in slowly, and as your style grade goes up, it'll begin the lyrics, but only when you're at a super high style rating will the chorus kick in, and that's just such a great touch that makes even the song a satisfying part of the combat experience. I never really listened to V's theme, Crimson Cloud, that much, so I don't really have a big opinion on that one, and Dante's theme, Subhuman, can be kind of catchy to listen to sometimes, but Devil Trigger is just a constant earworm. I could listen to it any day of the week. But if we're talking about my favorite thing related to Devil Trigger, it would be this one random memory from 2019. I was obsessed with this song and played it on the speakers whenever I was out driving. But one time I was at a red light and was blasting this song, and someone in the lane next to me was looking and jamming out to it as well. It's a true story. But sadly, few games are perfect, and Devil May Cry 5 is no exception, even if I think it's a significant cut above most every other game out there. In Mission 4, you switch over to V. The team wanted to add a new Devil Hunter to the playable roster and wanted to do something much different with him than Nero and Dante. What they settled on was something very unique. V is a human with a limited amount of demonic power. He needs to use demons under his command called familiars to do his attacks for him. Mysteriously, all of them are enemies that Dante killed in Devil May Cry 1. Griffin, Shadow, and Nightmare. The controls for V are very similar to Nero and Dante, it's just how you engage with combat that's very different. V is quite fragile, so you have to have him hang back and you use buttons to command Griffin and Shadow. The melee attack button is how Shadow fights enemies and he comes with a plethora of combos, while the shoot button commands Griffin to blast enemies from afar. And when your DT gauge is full, you can call in Nightmare for heavier attacks. These devils all have their own health bar, so you need to take care of V and also the familiars at the same time to make sure they don't die. If they do, it takes a bit for them to heal and get back in the fight. I'm sure this took way more playtesting than most any other DMC character ever crafted, and I'll say the controls are remarkably intuitive. For example, while moving V from side to side with the stick, I had no problem also using the stick to activate Shadow's Arbiter attack that sends enemies into the air. While I appreciate the teams want to do something fresh with V, and I think they did a good job programming it, it's the only part of DMC 5 I don't love. I do believe the carnage can be enjoyable at times, especially when Nightmare is active. There will be explosions non-stop and enemies flailing around, and then Griffin is sending electricity all over the screen and Shadow is impaling demons. It can be quite a spectacle. I don't think V's style is joyless. As I said, it can be an entertaining spectacle and the finishing blows are satisfying. I just don't like how V can get really button mashy on Devil Hunter mode or normal mode. My first triple S combo in this playthrough was Mission 4, because as V, it's pretty easy to get away with just mashing the buttons and watching the sparks fly. In my original review of DMC 5, I was feeling like perhaps there was something I was just missing with V's style that it made me not click with it. But it's as simple as this. I think it's fine on normal mode because you only have to play as V for 3 full missions and then a boss rush in Mission 14, so it's simple to get through, but I just don't think it's that fun and would rather be playing as Nero, Dante, or Virgil. The real issues began as I experimented with Dante Must Die mode over the years. That's when I felt like V's style really wasn't up to par with the others. On DMD mode, enemies just have so much health and are so resistant to being launched in the air that I'm left wailing on them for what feels like forever. It's not like you can't go combo mad as V, it's possible, but then I personally felt as though the action was too hectic to really make anything other than button mashing feel very viable. And then, on DMD, the familiars die so quickly that trying to revive them takes up precious time and leaves V vulnerable. I just don't think he was that fun to play as, and his missions, as small as the percentage of the game as they may be, are my least favorite parts of the game to play. But to reiterate, I don't think it's abysmal, especially on Devil Hunter or Son of Sparta mode. I just don't ever replay these parts compared to the other 3 playable characters. It's fine, it's just the only part of the game I don't enjoy, in an otherwise S-tier game. If you want to talk about actual problems I think DMC 5 has, you can look at the pay-to-win mechanics. You might not even notice that this is a thing because going from mission to mission you won't see it. The connection to the shop to use real money is in the main menu. I'm normally not someone who gets super up in arms over microtransactions. In fact, I didn't even mention them in my original review of DMC 5 because it didn't get in the way of my experience. But how it works is that you can just buy 6 blue orbs to increase your health instead of earning them in the game with red orbs or searching for secret missions. And for as low as $2, you can get 100,000 red orbs, with which you could buy almost an entire character's moveset right from the start of the game. If that's the kind of player you are, that's entirely up to you. It's just a video game, and you can spend your money however you want. I'm saying that on principle I have some issues. 1. The game was $60 at launch. Needing extra cash through things like this clearly showed how high production costs had gotten in AAA games. And 2. It just throws off the balance of the game. In all Devil May Cry games, how it's supposed to work is that you earn red orbs from performing well in-game. Enemies drop more of them if your style rank is high, and you get more of them for good mission ranks. You then must pick and choose how you spend those red orbs. This is a fundamental aspect of the design. Something cool about DMC 5 is how it got rid of all the recovery items. In previous games, using health ups or holy water or devil trigger gauge refills were useful but diminished your rank considerably. DMC 5 got rid of all of that. Instead, when you die, you have to make a choice. Either revive with a gold orb, which completely restores all your health and devil trigger, or you can use your red orbs to revive. When picking the orb option, you get to spend a little to gain a tiny bit of health back and hope you can make it, but if you die again, the red orb price goes up. You can spend a middling amount to get half health back, or spend a lot to get everything back and even do damage to nearby enemies. All 4 of these choices are valid depending on the situation, and I think it's a fantastic system that adds a lot more depth to the experience than the old items did. Using or not using an item just came down to if you care that your rank goes down. This gets players of all skill levels to think a bit before they decide what they want to do when they die. But the cool new system is thrown off by the fact that if you wanted to spend $2 actual dollars, you'll have all the red orbs you could possibly need. Which is funny because red orbs aren't even that hard to earn in this game. See that? That's my PC save file I've been using since 2020. I've got over 7 fucking million of the suckers, and I didn't pay for any of them. People's biggest issue with microtransactions are that if they're successful, you'll never know when publishers will draw the line. One day it's currency, and in the next it's full parts of the game. Capcom has had pay-to-win elements in a lot of their most recent games, it's just lucky these are easy to ignore. Though I think DMC5 Special Edition still having them is pretty egregious. One of the points of a remaster like DMC4 Special Edition, or DMC Definitive Edition, is that it's supposed to be the complete package, all DLC included. So that seems like a ripoff, since DMC5 SE was still a full-price game. But looking at what you do get from this, DMC5 Special Edition has Turbo Mode, which has become a must-have feature for me when playing Devil May Cry games, since it ups the game speed by 20%. The re-release has graphical options like ray-traced reflections, but that can't be used with Turbo Mode, so I didn't bother with it. The legendary Dark Knight difficulty is selectable here, where it just ups the enemy count by a significant degree, making style points and red orbs easy to amass if you think you can survive the hordes. And last but not least, DMC5 SE comes with a Virgil campaign. Like 3 and 4, it's just the main campaign, but with Virgil playable in all the levels. But this one feels a lot different than the other two. In 3, I just thought Virgil's playability felt tacked on and that he wasn't fun to use. And then in 4, I just didn't want to play the repetitive campaign again, even though Virgil's fun to use. In DMC 5, he has an even more fleshed out moveset than 4. He has all the same weapons, but they feel so much more impactful to use when activating many of the same combos he's always had. But then he's got new moves like a clone of himself you can use to fight with your Devil Trigger gauge, or your Sin Devil Trigger gauge where Virgil becomes super powerful and flies around the room slaying all before him. And when the gauge on top of your health bar is full, you can just totally annihilate everything with Yamato's Judgment Cut, or this super powerful ground slam with Beowulf that will send any boss flying up into the air. Virgil's a really easy character to get to grips with in DMC 5, and he's the most powerful DMC character yet, making him also one of the most fun DMC characters ever programmed. But the best thing about his mode is the music. Virgil hasn't gotten his own battle theme before, and they absolutely went fucking ballistic for this one. Casey Edwards, the composer of Devil Trigger, cooked up Bury the Light as Virgil's theme. I have absolute confidence in my opinion that Bury the Light is genuinely the greatest song ever composed for a video game, full stop. Now, I haven't heard every gaming song, of course, but I really do think this one takes the cake for me, and definitely belongs in the conversation of best gaming songs. It's a near 10-minute long lyrical odyssey on the character of Virgil, his trauma, his motivation, his whole arc put into one song, while also being one of the most badass demon-slaying tracks I've ever heard. The instrumental portions are headbanging but emotional at the same time. Everything about this song is just pure peak, which is put to great use in the final bosses they made for the Virgil campaign. The last 2 missions of the Virgil mode are full Dante battles where he uses all his tools and tricks, and it's really challenging. I'm pretty good at the final battles for Dante and Nero, but when playing as Virgil, these Dante fights still kinda kick my ass. But I love that they made it, because it really was putting in max effort for this Virgil campaign. But now we're talking about final bosses, when all this was an aside from talking about what few things I didn't like about DMC 5, which was just V's levels and microtransactions. So let's back up all the way in the main game to where we left off. V finds the Devil's Sword Sparta in Mission 9, but also Dante, who V proceeds to wake up by trying to stab him in the head. That takes the story back a whole month as we find V is the one who hired Dante to kill Urizen. If it wasn't obvious at this point, Urizen is just Virgil. In Mission 12, it's fully explained. Somehow, Virgil survived his defeat on Malay Island in DMC 1. His body was on the brink of total failure, but he tracked down Yamato, which was given to Nero by Dante in DMC 4. That's why he tore off Nero's arm. He needed the sword back. Though, I'm not sure how that's supposed to work. Nero's arm was never Yamato itself. He was able to fuse the two. It doesn't really matter, but it's kind of strange that Virgil can just turn Nero's arm into the sword, but I guess it's also weird how Yamato now allows you to create portals you can walk through. Something it had never done before in the main continuity, only in the reboot, which wasn't canon. But anyway, with what little strength he had left, Virgil used Yamato to separate his human and demon halves, hoping the demonic half could finally gain the power he'd been seeking all along and defeat Dante. That's Urizen. The human form is V. who is fully capable of emoting and realizing how wrong everything he's ever done has been, also carrying the full weight of the trauma Virgil endured while being a slave of Mundus in Devil May Cry 1, especially obvious when he sees the Nello Angelo clones in Mission 7.
Nice. Getting the band back together, huh?
What evil lurks, I must destroy.
I thought that was the plan all along.
V knew he was limited in power and wanted Urizen stopped, so he knew to hire the brother he still kind of hates, Dante. The news of the job is broken to Dante by Morrison, who's a returning character from the DMC anime, which is established canon in this game. But Morrison is now a completely different character than the show, but I wouldn't complain, because this version is a lot more entertaining than the generic-ass dude from the series. I just think he's funny.
Oh, I hate to spoil your dreams, ladies, but that shit ain't gonna happen.
What do you mean, Morrison?
See, there's this deed to this place, and I have it.
Why do you?
Clever little devil came to see me right before his last job. Said something like, "My dearest friend, I know you'll keep this safe, cause them crazy bitches..." Did I say crazy bitches? I'm sorry, I meant ladies. Anyway, the rest of the story is not important. You get the gist.
I wonder if he even plans on coming back.
Got me.
What is important is I have a job for you two. Cause the rent ain't free.
Mission 10 is Dante's first mission, and it takes place before the prologue where Dante gets beat by Urizen. And then once that backstory is explained, you jump to Mission 11 where the plot continues. Dante's gameplay style is very similar to DMC4. You have Trickster, Swordmaster, Gunslinger, and Royal Guard, and you switch between them with the D-pad. But while Dante's abilities had a high skill ceiling in DMC4, there wasn't much to do with it because he had a small list of weapons and not that many missions. Compared to DMC3, where Dante had a lot of tools at his disposal, but he couldn't make use of all of them at once throughout the campaign. DMC5 fixes this issue and is the best of both worlds. Dante unlocks a bunch of weapons in this game. In Mission 10, you have Ebony and Ivory and the shotgun, but also Rebellion, which functions the same as always, and Balrog, the bare-handed option. This is easily the best one in the series. In all the previous bare-handed weapons, punching and kicking would just be a part of the attack combo, but here, Balrog is essentially two weapons. You have the punch mode where you keep doing punches to ignite the flames of the gauntlets and release explosive charge punches on enemies and bosses, and then you can switch to the kick function, which has its own set of moves, upping the freedom you get with the weapon and increasing its stylish potential. It's super satisfying to use. In Mission 10, you see Rebellion break from the fight, and in Missions 11 and 12, Dante uses the Devil Sword Sparta to fight, but its moveset is the same as Rebellion. In Mission 11, you can find Lady's rocket launcher hidden, and in mid-air, this is pretty useful as you send a missile down to the ground which sends enemies back up to you to continue the air combo if you just finished a guy off. Missions 11 and 12 are so great because the designers are making levels specifically for Dante. He's a much more difficult character to use than Nero or V, and so he's introduced halfway through the game and his levels are more difficult, like Mission 12 being kind of a maze you need to navigate through, but along the way you'll get to try your hand at all of Dante's combat styles. The greatest reward for Dante having his own stages is the original boss fights. DMC4 bosses were definitely Nero battles, but they worked fine for Dante. But take Cavalier Angelo as the perfect example of what a ground-up boss for Dante looks like. She shoots projectiles, perfect for either Trickster or Royal Guard. The boss will fight from a distance and will rapidly get up close to attack, and your various styles and weapons can counteract this in a variety of ways. I love this boss fight, and on this playthrough I had a near flawless victory. I didn't even have all the weapons unlocked at this point. Not to brag or anything, but I thought this was pretty based gameplay. From this, you unlock one of DMC's raddest weapons, Cavalier. Dante turns pieces of that knight armor into a motorcycle he rides around on, but he can tear it in half and turn them into saws that shred demons. Every attack with this weapon feels really weighty and satisfying, and it tears through health bars like nothing else. The only weird thing about it is that DLC for the original game was an alternate version of the weapon called Cavalier R, which was painted red and had a new Swordmaster ability where it would drive forward even in midair. It's super useful, but only available as DLC for the original game. Special Edition thankfully includes it by default. You just can't use it in Bloody Palace for some reason. But either way, it's a sick-ass weapon. But the hits and the hype don't stop there. Dante realizes that if Virgil used Yamato to separate his human and demon halves, what would happen if he used Rebellion on himself like that? He then fuses his body with Rebellion and the Devil Sword Sparta to transform into his Sin Devil Trigger form with a new sword, the Devil Sword Dante. The DSD is the best sword in the game and comes with many perks that the other two don't, like Virgil-esque summon swords, the ability to do air combos with any style active, and some new combos. The Sin Devil Trigger is a blast to use because you become nearly unstoppable as you slice through everything in your path, even breaking Urizen's impenetrable shield and kicking his ass for a bit. The gauge for this form is filled primarily by holding a button to transfer your regular DT gauge into it, which is a great risk versus reward system. The reward is getting to use the Sin Devil Trigger, but the risk is that you won't have regular Devil Trigger, which will allow you to be more powerful and regain some health. Also, the DT gauge in this game was changed so that if you don't execute Royal Guard blocks perfectly, it'll consume your DT gauge and not your health. So if you drain all your DT gauge into the Sin meter, Royal Guard becomes riskier to use. But Sin DT is so powerful that it's worth it, especially once you unlock the upgrade that lets you skip the transformation sequence if you have a triple S combo going. And I'm sure, to someone who's never played Devil May Cry 5, the last paragraph was the biggest word salad you've ever heard, but anyway, in the final missions, Dante gets another rocket launcher which you can use in tandem with the one you found in Mission 11 that makes it even quicker on the draw when doing the air combo tactic I mentioned before, and then in Mission 16 Dante gets Cerberus back, only it's more powerful than it was in DMC 3. It's very similar to the old weapon, only now it has a fire bow staff equipped and an electricity rod alongside the icy nunchucks, making the weapon even more versatile. And the last upgrade for Dante to discuss is Dr. Faust, which Nico made for him. It's a hat that consumes red orbs to attack with, but you also gain red orbs when killing enemies with it. It's fun to use and all, but the greatest thing about this weapon is that it's a demonic hat that allowed the developers to do a series of Michael Jackson references. None better and more out of nowhere than the weapon reveal scene. Dante has had a bunch of goofy weapon reveal cutscenes, but none top this.
I'll take that.
In general, I think DMC 5 is the funniest game in the series by far. The best DMC plots have had equal parts outrageous action and spectacle, but also heartfelt story beats, and I think DMC 5 nails both really well. There's just something about the way the characters talk in this game and the delivery of the lines that makes every quippy line hit so well for me.
King? You? I don't know. I mean, you're a big guy and all, but you seem more like a knuckle-scrapping fart in the wind than anything else. No offense.
I can quote whole scenes from this game because the characters are so believable and entertaining.
See, she wants to invite you to her birthday party, but your phone is disconnected.
You're a smart one, Morrison. You notice the electric and water out too?
I expected nothing less.
So what's the good news?
Oh, I got a gig. Cash up front.
Cash up front. This I like. The water needs turning on and those toilets need flushing.
The story balances tone so well that you never feel a joke is out of place, or even notice when it gets more serious because it's all so natural. At the end of the game, the three hunters team up in Mission 13, where you choose which one you play as. Naturally, I just picked Dante. Then the trio is separated and you play as V in Mission 14, Nero in Mission 15, and then Dante for the rest of the game, barring the final boss. I only bring up this series of missions just to highlight how Mission 14, Diverging Point V, is always one I get apprehensive about replaying. And not even for my usual distaste of boss rushes. This part on Devil Hunter mode is actually pretty easy if you're strategic about it. V has to fight 3 of the earlier bosses, but you start without your familiars and you have to recover them one by one. I just have such a bad memory of this mission from my first playthrough. Because I picked Griffin in the Cavalier Angelo fight and was stuck on this boss for what felt like 10 minutes. But now I know better. I pick Shadow first, which makes pretty short work of the boss free fights, and then Griffin and Nightmare only making whichever ones you pick second and third even more straightforward. All this leads to the third act, where Dante defeats Urizen, and V, on the verge of death himself, decides to deliver the final blow. Which was actually the plan all along, as this restores Virgil to his original form, more powerful than ever. Leaving Nero with a lot of questions, and he gets the big answer.
If that's your brother, what happened to V?
He returned to himself. Go home, Nero. This doesn't concern you.
Like hell. I lost my right arm because of him!
This is not your fight. I need to stop him, and that's all that matters.
I'm not gonna let you have all the fun, Dante!
You don't get it.
Let me guess. I'm dead weight? Well, you can
That's
shove
not
it!
it, Nero.
What is it then?
He's your father!
I can only imagine that, for the longtime fan, this was a bone-chilling moment. To actually get to see on screen Dante confirming to Nero that Virgil is his father. Something that, when replaying DMC4, was pretty obvious, but again, finally seeing it happen 11 years later must have been really awesome. I like how Dante tells Nero he was dead weight in the prologue, probably because he knew that would piss Nero off and hopefully make him quit the mission. But then the reason he wanted him to do that was because he didn't want his nephew to know his father was the bad guy who needed to be stopped. It's kinda sweet in Dante's own way.
I had the feeling the first time I saw you, but I just wasn't sure. And then I saw how the Yamato reacted. And I was certain. He's your father. Now he needs an ass kicking. But I can't have you go kill your old man.
In Mission 18, Dante makes his way to Virgil, but he has to battle V's familiars to do it. The reason they're all DMC1 bosses is because they were the physical manifestation of Virgil's trauma from being a slave of Mundus. And now they want to get another shot to kill Dante. Each part of the battle playing remixes of the DMC1 battle themes in the background. It's great fan service.
One more round. It's like I'm back on Malay Island.
Though I do think this is one of the hardest missions to S-rank in the whole game because Nightmare packs a real punch. And that's after having battled Griffin and Shadow multiple times too. When Virgil reaches the top of the Qliphoth, he ponders about something pretty interesting. DMC5 brings Virgil's character full circle and makes it abundantly clear what the DMC saga was about. Devil May Cry 5 shows a flashback of the day Mundus' forces attacked Dante and Virgil's childhood home, and how their mother managed to save Dante and died trying to find Virgil, leaving Virgil alone to fend for himself and awaken his demonic powers from an early age. Dante revealed to Urizen in Mission 17 that he wasn't abandoned, Eva just died trying to save him too. With that knowledge, Virgil wonders,
that day, if our positions were switched, would our fates be different? Would I have your life and you mine?
As V, Virgil was more in touch with his emotions and admitted that all he ever really wanted was to feel safe and protected. As a child, he could only find that from himself. Which is why, in DMC3, he told Dante,
"Might controls everything, and without strength, you cannot protect anything, let alone yourself."
He rejected his humanity to be all-powerful so that he would never feel vulnerable again, but he found himself repeatedly defeated by Dante. And his arrogance led to his being defeated and enslaved by Mundus, to which he was then defeated by Dante again. Virgil's resentment of Dante makes perfect sense because in his mind, he's the one who sacrificed everything to be all-powerful, and yet Dante is the son of Sparta who won in DMC3. Dante is the son of Sparta to defeat Mundus. Dante is the one to vanquish demonic overlord after demonic overlord. Dante is the name feared throughout the whole underworld, while Virgil suffered defeat after defeat. But what always made Dante more powerful was his human side. In DMC3, he embraced being half demon, half human. By finding his strength in protecting the world, he became truly unstoppable, finding the humanity in others who didn't see it in themselves, and not hesitating to stop those who threaten the human world. That is true inner strength, the thing Virgil always lacked in his quest for more power. That's the setup for what's probably my favorite boss fight ever designed.
Time to finish this, Virgil.
once and for all.
I've replayed Mission 19 of DMC5 probably hundreds of times because it's a no BS clash of equals, Virgil and Dante at their most powerful. This fight has no quick time events or regular enemies to defeat, you just have to show every skill you've learned against a ludicrously OP opponent. Virgil's attacks are fast and fierce and do a lot of damage. But like the best Dante bosses, all your styles and weapons are put to the test here. There are countless ways to go about battling this boss and all are equally valid. Personally, I like to Royal Guard block most of his attacks at the beginning so I have a full gauge, and around the middle of the fight he'll fly into the air and dive into you. Doing the Royal Release on this attack with a full Royal Guard gauge does a wicked amount of damage. Plus, focusing on Royal Guard builds up the style meter pretty quick so you can let loose with the Sin Devil trigger in the second half when he uses his own Sin Devil trigger against you. Again, I've played this boss hundreds of times, but it's just so satisfying and replayable that I never get sick of it. The only complaint I can muster up is that on Devil Hunter mode, Virgil's a little too easy to beat. He doesn't attack as aggressively as he does on Son of Sparta or DMD mode, and he takes a lot of damage from your attacks. I get it's normal mode, but the DMC3 battle was more difficult than the normal mode battle in this game. But the higher difficulties really bring out the best in this encounter. It ends when Dante tells Virgil that Nero is his son, which Virgil didn't even know. Speaking of Nero, he's had a crisis of confidence due to finding the family he never knew he had. V told Nero that Dante and Virgil were destined to fight, but an orphan like Nero doesn't see it that way. He thinks that if you have family, you should fight to protect it. One call with Kyrie restores his confidence as he sets out to intervene. Father and son battle on the final boss, which is also a little too easy on normal mode, but the moment is one of the sickest in gaming. Nero regrows an arm and activates his own devil trigger to fight against Virgil. And the first time you use it really capitalizes on the moment.
Fuck you! Seriously now? Hell no. Here. Feeling accepting yet? Of your resistance or your strength? Both, fucking asshole!
Once you activate your DT, the music turns into Silver Bullet, a remix of Devil Trigger which sounds fantastic and is really climactic and emotional as the theme of Nero conquering all his personal demons and asserting himself as powerful in his own right against his supremely power-hungry father. The battle resulting in Dante and Virgil putting aside their differences and traveling to the underworld to sever the Qliphoth roots and save the world from a demonic takeover. Ending the game on a really funny note as Virgil and Dante just bicker back and forth while effortlessly tearing demons apart, knowing they can do so because Nero is in the human world protecting it while they're gone settling business in the underworld.
Don't you dare say it, jackpot!
DMC5 is not a long game. Beating the campaign on normal mode takes about 7 hours if you're watching all the cutscenes and trying to do all the secret missions. Or at least that's roughly how long my full completion playthrough took for the video. But the beauty of DMC5 is that beating the campaign is just the beginning. Obviously you can try your hand at higher difficulties like Son of Sparta or Dante Must Die, but now there's the Virgil campaign and there's Bloody Palace, which is 100 floors of high-octane action. This is the best version in the series because it even comes with the ability to practice floors you've already beaten, which is how I got so good at some of the bosses like Cavalier Angelo. But anyway, Nero and Dante both still have more mechanics to work with after the game is over. Nero unlocked his DT in the final boss, but you can use it in regular gameplay, and since his arm is back at the end, the Devil Bringer is back with it. So Nero becomes a whole new character after beating the game. You can still use the Devil Breakers, but it's an addition to the Devil Bringer and his own Devil Trigger. And Dante can just go mad with the upgrades too. Like how you can fully customize your weapon wheel to where you have Rebellion, the Devil Sword Sparta, and the Devil Sword Dante all on the same weapon wheel. I can't even explain it, it's just so oddly satisfying to be able to pull off consecutive sword attacks with 3 different swords. It keeps the style meter high because it's technically a different weapon even if you're spamming attacks. At the end of the day, the best way for me to describe Devil May Cry 5 is to say it's one of the most fun games I've ever played. There are many games I've been addicted to in my life, but what makes DMC5 stand so tall amongst them to be one of my all-time favorite games is just how perfect the experience is when playing Nero, Dante, and Virgil levels. The campaign is fun, the post-game is even more so, the production values are top-notch, it's got a fantastic soundtrack with some of the best songs I've ever heard put into a video game. I don't think V is that fun to play as, but besides that, I think Devil May Cry 5 is an all-time great, an instant classic. A game that came at just the right time for me. A game that was super fun and rewarding to focus on in the midst of the uncertainty that comes with graduating high school. But as for what's next for Devil May Cry, I don't know. It's so odd to think that we're nearly at a place where it's been almost 6 years since DMC 5 came out, because the previous game, DMC Devil May Cry, was only 6 years old when DMC 5 released. Devil May Cry 5 is one of the best-selling Capcom games ever made, so I'm sure a mainline game is in store at some point. Just look at how the recent Resident Evil games are all some of Capcom's best sellers, and that's led to nearly yearly content from that series. Maybe Capcom will pull an RE and give us remakes of DMC 1 through 3 or something, I have no idea. Maybe Nero takes center stage in DMC 6. Can the series survive without Dante? Truly, I don't know, but whatever it is, I'm definitely going to be there day one. No matter how much time passes between DMC 5 and the next game, it doesn't matter because we got DMC 5. It's a fantastic, near masterpiece that ties the DMC series together in ways I don't think anyone ever expected. And to be honest, that's enough for me.